and we'll start where we are now. So thank you very much, Matthew, for agreeing to be with us today. Care England is very, very supportive of digital transformation in care, and as Care England advisor on digital transformation, I'm very keen to encourage our members to take on board new solutions. So what we do today is we want to look at some of the key messages that we want to get over as providers and what assistance we think we need. So Care England is very focused on any transformation, such as digital transformation, should be creating value for the people we work with and for our own organisations, and also working with what NHSX is doing in integrating health and social care, which is going to be the major point, which one of the things that's come out of the past 6 months over the COVID times is that there needs to be even greater coordination. So the format of today is that I'm going to ask one of the Care England members, Sophie Chester-Glyn, to give a provider's view initially, and then Matthew will come in for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll go straight into questions. I do have some questions already submitted, which I'll put to Matthew, and well, I'll actually ask the people who put them to respond to ask them to Matthew, and then it's an open conversation because there's some really thorny issues out there, and we want to try and get to the bottom of them. So, without further ado, please, Sophie, I'd like to pass over to you to introduce your view on where digital transformation in care, and recently over the past 6 months, what's been happening.
Hello, great. Thank you for inviting me to talk, Daniel. And I think this is a great opportunity for social care to have a voice within this arena, as it's often left out. So it's great that we're having this. So a little bit about me. I'm a director of a care organisation in Bristol, and like many within the industry, we're SME, so we only have around 130 staff, but we do a spectrum of services from residential care to supported living to home care. And I also run a organisation, non-profit, called Co-Produce Care, which we started last year. Some people might have engaged with our YouTube channel, which is doing a lot of news around social care. So we've interviewed everyone from Martin Green to Kate Taroney to people with lived experience to give social care a bit more of a platform. So in terms of digital transformation, and especially the COVID-19 sphere, we found that actually a lot of reports, I read one this morning saying that 70% of social care organisations still do a lot of their work on paper. Actually, social care is quite ready to embrace the technology agenda at the moment, but one of the problems we have is either lack of resources or a lack of will within the social care and health sector to really support us in trying to do that, whether that's resources through support, financial, or actually wanting to integrate properly social care into what's happening within the NHS. So that's really a big theme for us. But I thought it might be good to sort of go through some of the things that we've been doing. And I know I've spoken to a few providers, and an example of one of the systems that's worked really well is Microsoft Teams, which everyone is very familiar with now, but was quite new sort of a few weeks ago, or a few months ago. And with Microsoft Teams, we've really piloted it in our organisation since 2018. So what we did was we got a grant from Skills for Care to look at how we can use it within our organisation. Digital Social Care helped us share our knowledge with other care providers within our area. But when we went to our local authority and we asked if they wanted to look at collaborating with us to see how we can share information with clients and with families, we didn't get that support. Actually, it was a bit of a tumbleweed situation. So from our point of view, we were ready to go, but local authorities weren't ready to embrace the technology. So I think there's a lot of a myth that social care isn't ready for it, but it's really thinking more about how we can enable the different systems to work together. And also, in terms of explaining to people why technology is important, I think we all kind of get it now, but the sort of Simon Sinek why factor is really important, because care is innately personal. So then trying to tell people that we need to do a lot of what we do instinctively now through technology is really important. So those messages, whether it's to care staff or whether it's to our GPs who are now doing remote consultations, or whether it's even with local authorities, again, just explaining why it's really useful to work together in that is really important, and including social care in those conversations. But we've really pushed forward with video consultations with staff, with tracking clients even through technology, and of course the usual things in terms of using scheduling systems and other bits of AI. So it's been really good for us, but we couldn't have done any of that without support that we had from someone internally. So what we did is we employed someone to be a tech support, to do all of the Zoom communications, to connect us with families, and actually, sorry, trying not to cough too much, but I've just developed a cough the last day. Fingers crossed it's nothing too serious. So that's really helped us, because we've had somebody internally to co-create the solutions that we needed with our technology. So for example, if we were using things like a care planning system, or we now have a scheduling system that we use internally, we actually needed someone full-time to help roll that out in terms of project management with the rest of our staff, and co-creating how we're using the different forms on that add-on app. And actually, if you get something off the shelf, it doesn't really work in social care, because personalised care is so personal and different for different people. So having that person there within our organisation to do that was absolutely crucial. And what we found around with talking to other organisations, that is really important, but not every social care organisation will have an internal tech support to do that, especially the smaller organisations. So there's definitely a scope to pool some kind of resources or information, either with more funding through local authority perhaps, or maybe NHSX would have a place in sharing some resources, or the NHS sharing their resources with how they're implementing their tech across the organisation, because that in terms of operability is been really, really crucial. So I talked a little bit about the lack of support, but also the lack of co-production in terms of technology and how it's used. So the NHS mail before COVID was quite sluggish, quite difficult to access. Obviously with COVID that's changed, but there's other things that the NHS have access to, which we hope will be shared with social care. So things like the new deal that's been brokered with NHSX and Teams, Microsoft Teams, for the NHS. We're hoping that that will also be rolled out for social care, so that the savings are not just within the NHS, but also will help with social care. Also, we've heard of things like virtual triage, and also things like continuing to encourage GPs to do online appointments, but also not losing the nuances that you have with face-to-face appointments. So there's obviously a push to do everything through technology, but what are we losing through just focusing on technology and not and abandoning that face-to-face contact, which is really important for social care. Obviously it's difficult now in COVID, but what happens post-COVID? So those are some of the things that we thought were sort of interesting to focus on, but also trying to get managers who have so much pressure at the moment to then take on more responsibilities with technology is really difficult at the moment. So the more we can get resources that are pooled together, the more that we can support people with things that the NHS is already doing, for example, the NHS Board Resource Hub or the Digital Academy, is one of the things that could be supported within social care, because you're able to, for example, maybe have a framework of good technologies which care providers can access and know which provider is safe, which provider can give good quality, and lessen the security risk of the huge amounts of people who are offering different solutions for us. And maybe also some ideas around health economics. Why are we going down certain routes for certain types of technology, whether it's with like we were just discussing before, Pepper, so a robot that can do things that care workers are doing. What is the benefit of that to people who use care, and also to organisations? So again, going back to the why factor, and with choice and co-production, rather than a top-down approach, it's just more involving social care. So I think I'm being told to be quiet now, so I'll leave it there.
It's great. I'm trying to keep on time, give everyone a chance. Sophie, that was a fantastic start, because you've actually brought some of the issues that I know NHS is looking at, and I know, speaking to providers over the past few days, that thing about how they choose, how they procure, where they go for that infrastructure. So that's a brilliant start. So Matthew, I'd like to go straight over to you to respond and to widen out the conversation to where you're from. So Matthew, please.
Sure. Well, Daniel, thank you. And thank you for pulling this together and for setting out the direction of travel that Care England wants to see, and the sector wants to see. And Sophie, thank you for a brilliant introduction. I mean, I think that was a really great starting point for this discussion. I'm very keen as well, it should be a discussion. I mean, I'll jabble on for a bit, but mostly I'm keen to hear perspectives from the sector and gather what ideas and advice I can. And I'm joined on the call by my colleague Luke, who I hope will not only correct me if I get anything egregiously wrong, but also help make sure that we capture brilliant ideas and advice and people's concerns and issues. And Sophie, your clear message that the sector is ready to embrace digital technology and digital transformation is very welcome. But equally, I'm not at all surprised by some of the restrictions and some of the things that you say are getting in the way. So I mean, one is obviously money and resource, and I'm conscious that there are a huge number of independent and small providers in the sector, some of whom really lack bandwidth, either financial bandwidth or sort of attention bandwidth, to be able to implement digital change. And I mean, it's not in a sort of resource constrained and bandwidth constrained environment. It's difficult sometimes to make the case for why sinking cost and time into digital technology is worth doing. And I mean, at the moment, my team and I are busy thinking about or putting together a bid for the spending review. And we are trying to get the best possible case together for why it's worth country investing in the digitization of health and care. And from my perspective, the case is very clear, but trying to explain it in terms of concrete benefits, when actually we know that a lot of the benefits accrue slowly and over time, and after a considerable investment of money and time, is quite tricky. And I mean, one of the things I wanted to say was, if anyone on the call has any brilliant examples or evidence of the benefits of the use of digital technology, particularly any sort of quantitative evidence, please send them like today, because we're putting together a bid and I want it to have the best possible case for why this is worth investing in care and in health. You also mentioned support, Sophie, and the issues around staff and the fact that you're blessed with somebody who knows their way around technology, but by no means every one of the X thousand providers in the sector are. And I think this is something we're well seized of, that there is a skills issue, and particularly for some of the sort of smaller operations, expecting them to be able to tap into deep tech expertise or even confidence around technology may be too much, and we need to work out ways we can help them. And I think you've pointed to some of the sort of creative solutions we ought to be thinking about, making it easier, creating frameworks so that people can buy stuff buy technology with confidence that it's from a list of products that we know meet certain standards, pooling expertise. There's a range of things we can do, but fundamentally, I think the message has to be in a sector of rising demand, of quite sharp requirements, a lot of expectation. Technology is not something, we're not trying to use technology to reduce the amount of personal care that people get, but rather actually quite the reverse, that the smart use of technology can actually enable the time, people's carers' time and attention to be used on actually providing care, and for those who most need it, in the same way as in health. Although there is a fear in some quarters that technology will stop people from seeing their doctors, actually we know that when used well, it ensures that doctors get more time with those of their patients that most need it. So I think we have a very clear mission and a very clear message to try and get across, both to the sector and more widely. The last 6 months, I mean, the months of the pandemic have in certain respects seen huge progress made very sharply in both health and care. I mean, the rolling out of NHS Mail, the use of Teams, the move to remote consultations. We thought these things were going to take years, they took weeks. But also, I think the period of the pandemic has showed up some of the gaps and some of the weaknesses more clearly. I think some of the weaknesses in the underlying digital maturity of a lot of the care sector, where, I mean, our assessment is about a third of the sector is pretty digitized, a third uses a mix of digital and paper, and a third is essentially entirely paper-based. And it's quite hard to use digital technology to transform and to share patient and client data, it's a service user data, if such a large proportion of the sector is working off paper. And I think another gap it showed up was it brought into sort of vivid technicolor what we knew, which is there are too many barriers between health and care, and data and information was not flowing the way we needed it to across that divide, and technology can really help with that. So look, the mission of NHSX is emphatically to work with social care as much as with health. We are very clear that on our absolutely sort of top core priorities is addressing the issues I've raised. We've bundled them together with in a sort of under a program we're calling Joining Up Care, which is really our top priority for the foreseeable future, which is essentially 3 elements. It's trying to address the barriers to adoption of technology in social care that Sophie has mentioned. It's making sure that the whole country is covered by shared care records that can ensure patient data can safely and appropriately flow between care providers, including health and social care, according to, and all done on the basis of standards of interoperability. And it's rolling out remote monitoring so we can transform the way care is provided, so that if you've tested positive for COVID, if you've got a long-term condition, or you're in a patient in a position that you could benefit, you could get better care from being monitored at home or in a home, and avoid having to go repeatedly and unnecessarily into hospitals or to see your GP, then we roll that out much more widely. And that together is our absolutely top priority. And I hope is clear, speaks very much to the needs of the care sector and the need to integrate health and care, and to come up with different models of the provision of healthcare that have a sort of transformative effect on what has to be done in formal health settings and what doesn't. Also, during the months of the height of the first wave of the pandemic, we've been focusing on the base connectivity in the sector. So together with colleagues in DCMS, we sat down with the telecoms companies and got them to pledge themselves to try and help improve connectivity to care homes, come up with packages of improving better connectivity for the sector, and we'll carry on doing that. But clearly decent connectivity is an absolute foundation for what we want to achieve. We've been trialing giving devices, Facebook portals and iPads and so forth to care homes so that they can be used both for consultations, but actually in practice more often for residents to see their family. And we're looking at how we roll that out much more widely. We're working closely with the Local Government Association on all this, making sure that we take into account the needs of the sector. You mentioned the Microsoft deal, Sophie. We're working with the LGA in negotiating with Microsoft how we can extend the NHS deal to social care. At the moment, the key issue is agreeing with Microsoft what constitutes social care. So we're probably a couple of months from a conclusion, but just to let you know the strong message from the sector that the benefits of this deal need to extend to social care have been well heard, and we're trying to put that into action. And we are really keen that as the government develops its strategy for the sector, that it takes into account the potential benefits and the transformative effects of digital technology, building on, I mean, for us, the components are the infrastructure, the connectivity and the basic systems and devices in place, the digital tools, whether it's sort of triage or scheduling, or all the things that you can do when you've got the infrastructure in place, the skills that Sophie talked about that we need to make sure are there so that any of this can be done, creating a sort of care tech ecosystem, so we actually have a sort of decent number of companies that are innovating in this space, coming up with the products that the sector needs. And on top of all of this, we have the mechanisms to flow patient data safely and appropriately between settings. And I think if we can get those in place, then we'll be in really good shape. So sorry, look, that was a bit of a stream of consciousness, but I hope it gives you a sense of sort of where the team and I are coming from and what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you, Matthew. That's great. I mean, I know from working with NHSX over the past couple of weeks, the acceleration in working with the sector has been quite immense. You mentioned the Joining Up Care programme, which will really get social care at the top table. You mentioned the work on infrastructure and connectivity, the close work with the Local Government Association, and the good news about trying to extend the Microsoft deal to social care. That's massive. I know there's been issues with the rollout of hardware, because that, and in various places, that's quite a difficult one. To give us what we need is the digital tools and the digital infrastructure and the digital ecosystem to create value for the people we work with, for the people, for our own organisations, and for the health and care system as a whole. So thank you. I'd like to pass on straight away to the people who've pre-submitted questions. And if you've got any questions or comments, please do come through in the chat. I've put some links in there to success stories, Matthew and Luke. So please do look at those. So the first questions are about, you mentioned the support and resources, Matthew. So I'd like to introduce about support and resources. I'd like for Jeff Butcher from the Blackadder Corporation and then Damien Wasey from the Mitigo Group to put their questions to you. So Jeff first, please. Jeff?
Just unmute. Hi. Yeah, the question I've got, and I think it's something you've touched on already, but the sector is under huge funding pressures at the minute. Occupancy has dropped. most of us just don't have the money to invest. So if we're going to enable this, my question is, what do you guys think you can bring to the party to help provide the financial wherewithal to make it happen? And just as a little example here, I've been looking at acoustic monitoring for quite some time now, and I haven't found it's got huge potential benefits in terms of safety, efficiency, and all sorts of different things. I haven't found a product on the market, and by the way, I've had 35 years in technology, so I kind of know where to go. I haven't found anything that can be deployed for less than £1,000 a bed. Yeah, so you know, someone who operates a 40-bed home, where are they going to find 40,000 quid for to do something like that? So I think this is a key problem, and I'm interested in your reaction to that, Matthew.
Okay, then
So
hold that one, Matthew. Can I introduce Damien to ask the question so you can ask a few questions at the same time? So Damien, over to you.
Thanks, Daniel. Matthew, it's been really interesting over the last few years that the sector has been encouraged to embrace technology, which is a brilliant thing. It's increasing productivity, increasing patient experience, service user experience, and the ability to provide the best possible standards of care. However, embracing technology increases the threat landscape for cyber attacks. So my question is around, how are you going to raise awareness of what providers and service users are going to have to embrace to monitor themselves and to make sure that they're not vulnerable to cyber attacks? Thank you.
Great. Do you want me to answer those two?
Yes, please.
Great. Okay. So first question on the money, and look, it's not at all surprising, and I wish I had an enormous pot of money that I could hand out. I don't, and obviously the model for the sector is a different one from the model for the NHS, which is clearly all sort of state provided. The shape of the sector is different, with so many independent, private and charitable players, and I don't think we've quite worked out exactly the right way, the appropriate way for state intervention to get this right. I totally hear you that for sort of very cash-strapped entities, expecting them to cough up 40 grand for the sort of auditory warning systems you've mentioned, or monitoring systems, is clearly a big ask. Equally, I suspect it's not feasible, and for a reason I'll come on to, not necessarily desirable, to create a big pot at the centre and just dish it out. Possible because, for obvious reasons, money is extremely tight at the moment. And we'll make the case for a measure more intervention than we've done so far, but this is very finite taxpayer money we're talking about, and the point about desirability is that I worry that it's very easy with good intentions in this space to create a sort of learned dependency on central funding, which actually over time, its individual points in time help, but over time actually inhibits the willingness of providers to invest because they think there may be another chunk of cash coming from the government or the centre. And so I think we have to be careful here about how we do it, and that we don't accidentally create perverse incentives not to invest. I'm open to ideas. I'm open to how we do it. We've got exactly the same discussion in the health side of the house, where I worry about exactly the same thing. I mean, there are definitely things we ought to be able to do that that help. For example, Sophie mentioned the making it easier for providers to buy with confidence. So creating procurement framework so that what limited resource is available for technology isn't wasted on crappy products because we've done some vetting and support. I think there are some services we can give from the centre in terms of provision of standards, of procurement frameworks, of best practice sharing, of training, that will help regardless. It's that extra level of, and are you going to be willing to sort of put your money where your mouth is and stump up hard cash for the sector, that it gets sort of more complex. And I mean, I can't sit here and tell you, yes, we are, and it's brilliant, and I've got my checkbook out. I think we're going to have to work out the best, most efficient, and most appropriate ways of finding ways to incentivize the sector to invest in this at a time which is extremely hard pressed, without either breaking the bank or creating perverse incentives. Sorry, it's a little bit of a sort of long-winded answer, but I hope it gives you a sense of it. The cyber point from Damien is a very good one, and it's close to my heart because my previous jobs was as Director of Cybersecurity for the government. In fact, I have on my desk a, there we go, from a NATO meeting. That used to be me. So I mean, it's something I care about. And the truth is, it would be ridiculous to expect 15,000 separate and many small providers to develop sophisticated cyber defense strategies for relatively small tech operations. I think what we need to be doing is making sure that we help everyone in the sector do the basics. So essentially the simple steps set out in the Cyber Essentials program, or for bigger operations, the Cyber Essentials Plus program, we have a measure of support and a measure of monitoring and compliance through the DSPT, the toolkit, and we make sure that we provide the tools and an easy route to be cyber secure. We provide a light amount of monitoring to make sure that people are compliant, and we don't expect people to be cyber security whizzes when they're trying to run a care home, but we do help them to do the basic things that will mean, unless it's a sophisticated attacker that's coming for them, then they should be plus or minus pretty safe.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I've got a, I'd like to just bring in quickly Martin Green, the Chief Executive of Care England, who had a point on potential solutions to this, the resources issue. Martin.
Thanks very much, Daniel, and thank you very much for your great introductions, both Sophie and Matthew. One of the things I think, Matthew, the point you made, which was very important, was if you could deliver something around the quality assurance and governance framework, I think one of the other things we should do is talk to technology providers about leasing schemes and some of the schemes that will enable people to afford this technology without having significant capital outlay. And because I think also that will help them to understand that they don't need to be hooked into something which a few years down the line might be obsolete. They can then start to trade up with the technology. But I do think it'd be really helpful, even if we could broker conversations. I think Care England would be happy to do that. And Matthew, I don't know whether you'd be in a position to do that, but it'd be great if you could broker conversations with technology providers about different mechanisms to fund, so that the issue about capital investment is not the only route.
Yeah, it's a really good thought. And actually have a really excellent commercial director in NHSX who I will talk to about this, both about the frameworks and also about the financing point. It's only him and one other doing all our procurement and procurement strategy for both health and care. So it's a tight resource environment, but I think it's really worth pursuing. And what I may do is suggest he or his team connect to Care England.
That would be great, Matthew. Thank you.
Matthew, it's interesting, coming over the chat, there's a couple of points being made about whether technology should be strictly judged on a return on investment, or what I look at as a creating value in a more general sense, because Jeff, who spoke earlier, makes the point where he's focusing on improving the quality of care and the overall being of residents. Technology can help by freeing up staff to spend more quality time with residents, but it won't exactly save costs. And
Yeah.
Henry from Recruitermate was making the point that actually it should be done on a straight ROI basis to judge the efficacy of new solutions.
Yeah, and look, this is the sort of perennial problem, because the truth is, with very rare exceptions, I think using technology to make cash releasing savings is very unusual. And in a sort of care home or a GP surgery or whatever, freeing up 10% of a person doesn't actually make a saving, because you're still employing a person. What it does do is allow 10% more time by that person to be spent providing actually human contact and care with a resident or service user, whereas before they might have been doing paperwork or providing less value-added service. So yes, I mean, I totally agree. We need to be realistic and plausible about the benefits of this. I think that we still need to try and quantify them as best we can, because as ever with public spending, you have to make the case in a sort of constrained environment. So again, I mean, Luke has introduced himself on the chat, so thank you, Luke. Luke from our team. Any brilliant examples, particularly quantitative evidence you can give us, please do.
Okay, I mean, it's interesting because one of the points coming out, and I want to pass on to the next point of discussion, is that any thought to actually getting someone coming. This is Carl from the new CIO at Care UK, is talking about, has there been a push for collective buying in the sector, and that's something. I know NHSX is looking at some potentially frameworks, but is that something that could be brought in as well?
Yeah,
something could be encouraged.
I mean, the Microsoft deal was the first national procurement in the first instance for health, but coming on to care, and I hope marks a new willingness to look sort of inventively at how we can use collective buying power and the collective wisdom, experience and intelligence for everyone's advantage. I mean, I'm very struck in both health and care, the relationship between people selling technology and providers buying technology is an asymmetric one. And it's really hard. I mean, heaven knows even more if you're a sort of small care home, but even if you're a big, ugly, acute trust, to get this right. Because, I mean, why should you have in-house the level of expertise, commercial and tech nous, that's required to be a match for the people selling you the technology? So, I mean, I do think there is a job for the centre to do. Doesn't actually necessarily need to cost very much money at all, but just to try and address that asymmetry. Thank
you. So I'd like to pass on now to another area which was come over in the questioning, which was, and I've termed this the how to progress transformation. And so there's 3 questions in this area. So I'd like to introduce John Craig from Care City, Jen Walker, then to go on to Jen Walker from Sunrise Senior Living, and then Josie Dixon from the Care Policy and Evaluation Centre at the LSE. So John, and then Craig, then Jen, and then Josie, if you could come through with your questions, please.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, I lead Care City, an innovation centre for healthy ageing in Barking. And for us, a huge part of the rationale for digital tech in care is enhancing the health of residents. Enhanced health and care homes showed us the difference that improvements in access to healthcare for care home residents can make. And the numbers are such that a marginal improvement in the contribution care providers make the health of their residents gives you a huge payback. I guess my question is about how we advance that agenda as between national and local players. So at Care City, we're working on prototyping enhanced health in domiciliary care, remote monitoring in care homes, but also working with Healthy IO on a wound care app to kind of unbundle some of those care pathways so that they're accessible to care homes and care home staff even under lockdown conditions. And of course, you know, some of those areas of operation for the NHS are huge and hugely costly. So we think the benefits are huge, but that's not just a digital enterprise, it's a clinical and workforce change agenda. We're also working on apprentice nursing associates in care homes and London living wage projects for care staff, because really this is about enhancing the value of care and changing the business model of care homes and some care providers. And I think that's partly our job as a local innovation player to try and do that, to pull some of these strands together, make some experiments, and if they work, you can cherry pick the successes, and if they don't, I'll hold my hand up. But how can we, given that in a sense your scope is the tech part, how can we get that conversation between these sorts of local experiments and national policy and strategy right, such that we don't miss the potential to really transform what care is capable of and the value of some care providers' offers, rather than just digitising what they already do.
Okay, so pass on to Jen to do the second question.
Thanks, Daniel. So I work as head of marketing for Sunrise Senior Living and Gracewell Healthcare, and this is my first Care England webinar, so all fairly new, learning a lot. So my sort of summarised question was around trying to work with the NHS. So as a care organisation, from a technology perspective, it can be quite painful. So NHS services still use faxes, and getting approved for NHS mail or getting your own email system accredited, as we have done, is really slow and incredibly bureaucratic. So my question is, how will you increase the pace of change and working across services and boundaries, and sustain standards of confidentiality and manage cybersecurity risks? I know we've touched on slightly already.
Great.
Josie, would you put your question, please? The third part of this on how we progress transformation.
Sure. I'm also doing a lot of learning. I followed the EPACS conversation around end-of-life care very closely, and then I haven't really looked at tech in care or health for quite a while, so I'm coming back to this. But I guess my question is quite a naive one in a way. What are the main barriers and opportunities for development in the sector? And I guess I'm thinking that it's so diverse, and it's kind of very evident from this conversation, the hugely diverse approaches and potentials, and as well as where people are starting from, where they'd like to get to, you know, in the sector. So yeah, just kind of what are the opportunities and barriers there?
So Matthew, are you okay to respond to those three?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So I mean, to start with John's points, I mean, look, first of all, I'm really pleased to hear that you've been making use of care pathways or technology that allows care to be delivered in the home or in care homes, and that you've seen serious benefit from it. And same request, if you can help us use that to evidence why this is worth investing in, please let us have whatever you have. It sounds like you're doing some brilliant things. And the fact you're working with Healthy.io and other sort of brilliant tech companies or health tech companies is superb. But your underlying point about how we get the hinge between sort of national and local is a really good one. I mean, I think I've several answers for it. And number one is, I think we can address it with some of the levers we have. So, for example, on the health side, my team is working with the team of the National Medical Director at NHS England to look at the care pathways for a number of the most prevalent long-term conditions. and build into those pathways the use of monitoring technology that will allow care to be provided and patients to be monitored out of formal health settings. So I think we can address it from that way, but clearly we need to find mechanisms to work within the sector, and it's difficult. I mean, look, you know vastly better than I do, but in such a sort of vast and disparate sector, I mean, it's perfectly possible to have a sort of super digitized, transformed care operation sitting next door to one which is entirely paper-based, and the good practice from one doesn't necessarily move by some sort of magic or osmosis to the others. I think we probably need to look at more active mechanisms, which will be a mixture of using organizations, leaders, voices, channels across the sector to get over the message about best practice, trying to find incentives to drive the best practice, trying to put in place the foundations so that people don't face so many hurdles in trying to adopt best practice, and creating and supporting what mechanisms are already there in the sector to try and share good things that are happening more widely. I don't think there will be simple or sort of straightforward answers to that. I don't think it's that sort of problem. And in fact, it's the sort of problem where, frankly, we need all the ideas and help we can get. And if you have collectively or individually brilliant ideas for how to spread best practice, then, I mean, please let us have them, because it's a really thorny question. And I mean, spreading best practice is tricky at the best of times, but when in a situation where you have a sector which is so split up into so many players, which is under such pressure, and where coming up with the extra mind space and money to be able to do this is so difficult, I suspect it'll need a sort of a strategy with as many prongs as we can manage. Jen's question, and I'm giving this, doing this webinar just down the road from Sunrise Chorley Wood. So I go past one of your homes many times a day. The question was around working with an NHS, which is itself not always an unparalleled paragon of digitized transformation. And you mentioned fax machines. That clearly the issue is much wider. We have our Secretary of State has a Axe the Fax campaign, and purchases of new fax machines have dropped to almost zero. But the truth is, yes, I mean, it is not a system in which data flows freely or straightforwardly in the way that we would like it to. I've seen enough areas of the country that have put in place shared care records which do allow data to flow, including between health and social care, to know that it is possible and that it can be done in a way that protects patient privacy and keeps that data secure. So, I mean, we absolutely have to take with us the public and the professions, that their public will know that their data is going to be kept safe. The professions will know that they're not going to land in trouble for sharing data in ways they shouldn't be. But it is definitely doable. We know that, we've seen it, there's enough good examples around. We need to spread that, which is why I'm so keen to make sure there are shared care records across the country that do this. But I have also seen enough, I mean, heartbreaking examples of where critical information about patients didn't follow them or go with them, either from care homes into the NHS or out of the NHS into care homes or hospices or other settings, that, and in those cases, patient care was compromised or made worse as a result, to know this is absolutely something we have to tackle as a matter of urgency. And for me, I think it is the biggest contribution technology can make to breaking down that barrier between health and care, is making sure that that patient data can safely and appropriately and usefully flow between health and care. Josie's question is a sort of huge one, which is sort of what are the opportunities and what are the barriers. I mean, I think you've put your finger on one thing, which is one of the barriers is not having the picture on the front of the box so that everyone can see this is where we're aiming at, and this is what we are all moving towards. So I think finding a way of agreeing, co-creating, setting out that vision, I think will really help. My team is engaged in an exercise we're calling What Good Looks Like, which is, as the name suggests, trying to identify sort of some simple criteria that will set out what good looks like for in the context of acute trusts or GP surgeries, but also care homes or domiciliary care providers in the use of digital technology and digital transformation. And this needs to be, I think, something we talk about, something which is co-created, something which gives a sense of what, if you run a care home, some clear advice about what are the things that you ought to have in place so that we have a sort of, we're marching to a common destination. Other barriers, I mean, I think it's the flip sides of the things I've mentioned. It's the absence of connectivity, the absence of the sort of base digital systems and hardware and software that you need to run a sort of basically digitized operation. It's an absence of skills, and with that, a lack of confidence. It's the data not flowing, and probably for me, from what I've seen from my conversations, top of the list is there just being not enough bandwidth, money or time to be able to do the things that lots of people might want to do, but they're too busy trying to get through the day or the week.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I think that takes us forward. Anything more to say on that, John or Natalie or Josie? Because I think we have time.
No,
Oh.
No, really helpful. I think the work you mentioned with the medical director at NHSE, looking at care pathways, not just thinking about the connectivity and technology within care homes, is spot on. I think there's huge potential to that work, actually.
It's great. Matthew, I mean, I'd like to sort of come into something which a few people have come to me about changing behaviour, and we used to hear a lot in the Cabinet Office about the nudge unit, the influencing, and there's a question again from Josie on encouraging change. Josie, are you still there?
I certainly am, yes. Yes, I guess this question came from the point of view that, you know, a lot of what makes, I guess there are huge technological infrastructure issues and as you're saying, bandwidth, but there is also the sort of human technology interaction, and a lot of what makes, you know, IT technology initiatives successful is human behavior and that interaction. And I'm just sort of wondering what the dangers and opportunities are here in terms of the kind of behavioural responses that you would be hoping to, you know, prompt to move this agenda along in the sector. And I guess it touches on John Craig's point about this being about a workforce change agenda as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, fundamentally, I don't think we're talking about technology here. The technology is, the challenge is not a technology challenge. The technology we're talking about, with rare exceptions, is absolutely standard, not difficult in technological terms. It is a challenge of people and systems and incentives and behaviour. We're not trying to do anything in technological terms that's sort of wild or exciting. This is very straightforward bits of technology and systems. It's not to say they can't be improved, of course they can, but the real challenge is absolutely one of people and behaviour and systems. And I mean, there, I think it has to be a combination of creating the sort of push factor. And look, it is one of the silver linings of a very dark cloud that the pandemic has pushed a level of engagement with digital technology that we thought would have taken years. And I mean, just for example, the move to remote consultations was done in a matter of weeks and brought people with it who I suspect never thought they were going to be doing remote consultations, either as patients or as clinicians. So partly it's that. So I think partly it's the pull of creating the right incentives and making it as easy and straightforward as possible to do. So creating the frameworks, the standards, the support groups, the sharing, that means that technology doesn't have to be something terrifying and a bit alien, I think will be really key to it. And I mean, I'm very clear that if this is all about tech people talking to tech people, it's going to fail. That increasingly I've realized the job of me and my team is not to talk to the tech people in health and care, important and wonderful though they are. It's to talk to the chief executives and the finance directors and the heads of care and the heads of nursing and so forth, to make sure that they are engaged with this agenda, because it will never be driven if it's seen as a tech thing that you can give to your tech person in the basement and hope they get on with it.
Okay, thank you. I think it's very important. We often hear it in care that it's often, some people conjecture that carers on the front line aren't ready for new tech, but the stories coming through are that actually people really embrace it. And I heard from a provider recently where the uptake of new technology has actually increased their retention rates of staff, one of the major points in care, because people feel they're working for a go-ahead organization. I talked to people in Sophie's organization recently, and that's what keeps them going. So I think we shouldn't accept the norms. We should actually challenge people to take on new technology. Has anyone found that in their organizations where take up as tech has actually enhanced how staff are feeling? But bear that in mind, and if someone's got a point on that, come in the chat. The next point was about, you mentioned and I'm embracing this wholeheartedly, the joining up care. There was an old joke, I think, by John Rouse, who said that there were 2 cockroaches left at the end of the world, and they were still discussing integration of health and social care. And I think there's real opportunity now that with the digital transformation, there is a real hope that this can actually be realised. So I'd like to bring in a few people on this issue. So I believe there's a couple of questions from, I'm not sure who's going to ask them, from Tunstall, from either Angus, Zilla or Faye. And there's also another question from Jen Walker from Sunrise Senior Living. So would the representative of Tunstall, Angus, Zilla or Faye, please come forward?
Yeah, if I can pick up, thank you, Daniel. Market Access Lead at Tunstall Healthcare. So my question is around sort of the NHS being the sort of, or appearing to be the on the face of it, the driver, as you expect, with sort of a title of NHSX. And when you look at the sort of the web links that were sent out, the sort of focus seems to be very NHS driven, NHS orientated, and the branding is very NHS focused as well. And I note in the one of the comments, I think from Nuno, it talks about the integration and the move to a digital social care point of view, not one where the NHS is driving. So my question is around the NHSX approach to social care, which seems to be, again, when you look down the list of sort of drivers and metrics, sort of quite near the bottom of the list rather than at the top of the list. So if we could get your views on that, please, Matthew. And then secondly, there are sort of so many arm's length organisations. So how are NHS working with the ICSs, the STPs, the local authorities, and then the sort of the wider NHSI, NHSE, NICE, and sort of CQC and other organisations to drive the digital agenda?
Okay, and Jen, would you like to come forward again? Jen, are you there?
Yeah.
There's a question you put on about how do you balance Jen's original question was, how do you balance the interoperability with driving innovation, and how do you manage the central versus the local in terms of systems tools? We hear more about the ICSs and what footing they're going to be on. So what's the local and regional vehicles whereby this is being encouraged? And will there be uniformity across them? Because many of our caring members work across various local authority and CCG areas. And one of the things we face is the lack of uniformity among them. I was speaking to a provider yesterday who said that, I couldn't name and shame the local authority, but they were still asking for handwritten reports, not even Word documents, but handwritten and hand-signed reports. So how do we deal with this lack of uniformity as well? Jan, any more to add on that? Okay, there you go, Matthew, that's it.
Okay, so take the questions in turn. So look, the point around the prominence given to care in what we do, it's a totally legitimate question, and I get the sense among in the sector that it's sort of treated as a poorer nation. I mean, I hope from what I have said, it should be clear that social care is absolutely at the heart of what we're doing, and the single priority set of programs that we have gone to, the Joining Up Care agenda, there are three elements. One is exclusively about social care, one is about sharing data between health and care, and one is about getting the care pathway into care settings. So, I mean, I hope that should give you some confidence that social care figures very prominently in our thoughts. But look, it's right to sort of hold us to account for that. Look, there's a question around how we work with others, organisations, sort of CQC and others. And actually, I mean, as it happens, I met with Ian Trenham this morning. He was banging the drum very helpfully for making sure that data, it was a meeting on data, and he was banging the drum making sure that the needs and data from the social care sector are properly factored into the wider whole. We talk often to Information Commissioner and National Data Guardian, and I mean, there's a sort of range of providers, regulators and bodies, and I hope we're in touch with all of them. But if you think there's the possibility of a gap, or we may have forgotten somebody particularly pertinent to the care sector, please say, so we can address that or reassure you. And then this final point around central versus local and uniformity. I mean, it is really difficult. So there is a history of trying to impose everything from the centre, which doesn't, I don't think, work. The health and care sectors are too diffuse and just not amenable enough to central direction to be able to think that you could sit in Victoria Street and sort of issue an edict and health and care sectors will merrily fall into line. Equally, after the National Programme for IT, the approach was very much sort of just let everyone do everything, and came with certain advantages, but meant that you had a health and care sector that in which there was a sort of massive problem of interoperability or lack of interoperability, because everyone had separate systems and nothing spoke to anything else. And that emphatically true within health, within care, and between health and care. So I think for me, the answer is sort of somewhere between the two, which is a centre that sets out parameters, procurement frameworks, standards for data, both semantic and technical standards, so that systems can talk to each other, and create some national mechanisms to do the things that can usefully be done at national level. That at system level, we have ICSs that understand that they need to, for example, make sure they have shared care records for their systems that join up care and health, and that they create a sort of local inclusivity. and individual providers who are given some of the sort of support in terms of frameworks, in terms of advice, in terms of all the things we've been talking about, that it becomes a bit easier for them. But look, I don't think this is not the work of months. This is the work of years or decades. You start from an installed base of enormous variety and complexity, and even if we tomorrow unveil all the standards that are needed, and even if every procurement that ever happens from now on is consistent with those standards, it would still take a long time for the installed base to transform into systems that all speak to each other. And unfortunately, the even ifs aren't going to be true anyway.
I think it's very important. One of the points there is that we now have a voice, and I'll say to people that we can, via Caring or directly, we can go straight to Matthew and Luke and his teams. We have various contacts to put these points there straight away. We can get them straight to the heart, and the responsiveness is something that's really changed over the past 6 months. I think the reactivity. I always say with digital transformation, it allows us to be reactive, proactive, and predictive as well. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get so we can open those channels to people. On the chat, Nuno's come through with some interesting. There's two things coming through on the chat. One is about how we interact with loosely I say the statutory authorities. And I know it's very useful what you've said, because I know Martin Green just after this call is speaking to Kate Tironi. So what you've said is will go down really well. But there's a thing how we deal with the different statutory bodies, and Nuno, I'll ask you to come in a minute. And the other point is about there's a bits going here about how the mental health of staff. And so after that, I'd like to bring in Chantel and Paul Johnson from Radar Software as well. So can I go initially to you, Nuno? Are you there, Nuno? Yes. Nuno.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, my point is one of someone who has been working very closely with the teams at NHSX and NHS Digital. And clearly, we're seeing care providers doing digital transformation under their own steam at a record pace as we speak. The perception I have is that there's clearly an unprecedented amount of goodwill from all players. Everyone in one way or another is seeing the advantage of doing digital transformation in several aspects of the operations of care providers. My question is one of more of a system level value realization. So what we're seeing right now is there's about 30% of care providers across the UK who, for one reason or another, decided to digitize their electronic care planning. And I focus primarily on electronic care planning because it tends to be the spine of digital transformation across care providers. Once that is in place, it becomes a lot easier for care providers to realize value in a way that has a positive impact on quality of care. And it also enables better interoperability with primary care, with acutes and so on. My question, I guess, is the fact that we have so far failed to bring to the table an active engagement with regulators, both England, Scotland, Wales, where it is very obvious when we serve, for instance, very large care providers with hundreds of registered locations, the functions related to auditing and care quality of monitoring become a lot more efficient. So when we start looking at a system level and we see the role of CQC, we can imagine multiple ways in which CQC can dramatically improve their services at the same time that they increase the effectiveness of their services. We don't see CQC to this day, and I don't think we have anyone from CQC on the call. I am still trying to find the right forum for us to entertain exploratory discussions with CQC about what digital and widespread digital transformation can mean for the role of the regulator. So that was question one. And question two, frankly, is just one of Obviously, Matthew is coming at integration and digital transformation from the point of view of the NHS, and this is not a criticism or don't take this with any hint of negativity. What we are seeing, though, is that there is tremendous movement within social care for digital transformation to take place, and with the best will in the world, the vast majority of what happens within social care is not dictated by what the NHS may or may not want. So whenever there is a discussion, for instance, of joining up care, promoting the adoption of iPads, or even the shared care record, there is only a certain amount of leverage that NHS has with regards to a big chunk of the care provider landscape. At which point I wonder if there is the need for us to create a platform which is more balanced, where social care has a stronger voice, NHS has a perhaps less prominent voice. And again, this is not a criticism, because within NHSX, all I see is very capable people doing a tremendous amount of work with a phenomenal learning curve going as we speak. The truth is, there is quite a lot of good work happening within social care. We just don't seem to be able to find our voice and coordination that the NHS has within NHSX. So those were my questions. I hope
you're happy about that, Matthew. I think the general point being our representation is growing, but it's still not getting through, and it's ways to actually get that through with NHSX and the other statutory bodies. Take it away. Would you like to come in on that, Matthew?
Okay, yes, and then with apologies, I'm going to have to run. And look, let me try and answer Nuno's points in turn. So, I mean, one of the things, it's slightly unfortunate in a way that NHSX has a name with NHS in the title, because although we are part of NHS England, we are also part of DHSC. And with our DHSC identity, we're emphatically not approaching everything from a sort of NHS perspective. We have a team, since we've set up NHSX, that team has grown, I mean, quite substantially, which is dedicated precisely to trying to engage with the care sector, see things from the care sector's perspective, and not see the care sector through the prism alone of the NHS. And if we are, or if we ever give that impression, then we've not succeeded in what we need to be doing. With our DHSC technology directorate hat on, we can convene members of the health family, regulators, the CQC and others. And we have had a series of roundtables, seminars, issues on things that are of the sorts of things we're talking about now. And I think if we can perhaps do a better job at connecting to the care sector to make sure that you feel you have a voice, that voice is being heard, concerns, ideas and things like that are properly heard, then I think that would be a really good development. And I think we need to work with Care England and other bodies to try and take the wisdom, perspective, concerns and priorities of a sector with 15,000 separate members and distill them into things that can be fed into national policy debates, discussions with regulators and things like that. And I think it probably needs to be us talking more, listening more, engaging with Care England and others like Care England more, to make sure that that's sort of the voice of care is sufficiently fed in, not as how does this affect the NHS, but what matters to care.
Matthew, you said it, you've got to go. How long have you got? Another 5 minutes or?
a couple of minutes, if we could do it.
Okay. Again, I just want to know. We'll close off here. I just want to say that you've got a direct line now. I would like to Matthew, through to Care England. Thank you very much for your time. There are more questions, so please do come, and we'll come back with questions and we'll feed them into Matthew's team. But I'd like to hand over to Martin to just say a final word.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel. And can I thank you, Matthew? That's been a really useful session. Thank you, Sophie, for an excellent start, posing some really useful questions from the sector. I think you were right, Matthew, when you said that this is going to be a marathon more than a sprint. But I think we should also recognise that there has been a lot of sprinting done because of COVID. And what we must do is use that as our platform to move this agenda forward. Inevitably, there will be some people who are more anxious to embrace the agenda than others. And I do think we should all start from a coalition of the willing. And I think what I would also like to say to you and your colleagues is that Care England is here. We really think this is an important agenda. We want to help you to deliver it. And I know that most of our members are in the same space. So thank you for your time today. Thank you, everybody, for being part of the debate, for the questions you've posed, which I think have been absolutely excellent questions. And let's make this a running conversation. So thank you very much. And thank you, Daniel, for initiating this and for coordinating it and chairing it so well. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. And
thank you.
See you soon. Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Daniel, are you still on the phone?
I am there, Angus.
Hi. Yeah, just wondering how to get stuff over to you. Is it best to send stuff for the attention of Matthew via email?
Yeah. Just send me via email. I mean, I've got direct line to his team. So yeah, it's there.
Brilliant.
Emily, is Emily? Is it Emily? I'm not sure which Emily that is. Okay, yeah, you can. So how was that? Just some feedback, Angus. How was that?
No, it was good. I think there are so many questions and so many views, if you like, that trying to get that across in a short period of time is really difficult. But I think the webinar was useful. I think Matthew was bombarded with a lot of information, and these questions are probably already being addressed and dealt with. But for me, it's about the effective communication to organisations and about what's going on. I mean, my question was around, a lot of this is when you look on the face of things on the website and so on, it's all NHS focused rather than social care focused. So actually, if you make it more social care focused, people buy into what you're doing more, because they think you're focusing on their area of the world, not the NHS all the time. And whilst I recognise the importance of the NHS and so on, and Matthew mentioned GPs and care homes and acute trusts and so on and so on and so on, he wasn't necessarily talking about local authorities and social care commissioners and so on and so on. And I think that's something that is missing. I really do.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, I better go because I've got things to do. But no, I really take on board. But we have that direct line, and there is the Digital Social Care Steering Committee and NHSX, which I'm on. There's various other. I'm doing some user research at the moment. They are going to put money into it.
Sure.
And we have to direct them how they're going to use that money.
Absolutely.
So direct suggestions on how they should be using the money that they're going to put in for is make it really simple.
Yeah, we've got a couple of white papers we'll send over to you.
Definitely. We had a couple of people on the call, say for people in recruitment who can directly refer to ROI directly, but I want to widen the argument to value creation in the sector as a whole.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Good stuff. Good to talk to you, Daniel. Cheers.
Keep well.
Bye now. Bye.
Bye.